All right, so we're on page 1 in the opening prayers, the altruistic motivation. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Next is the Action Buddy Cheetah prayer. We recite, tonight we'll recite it 3 times. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. The long refuge prayer. We take refuge in the kind root Lama and lineage Lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root Lama and lineage Lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root Lama and lineage Lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Taking the Bodhisattva vow on page 4. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to Bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to Bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. The short refuge prayer. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. And the four immeasurables on page 6. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Okay, thank you very much. Those are our opening prayers. So tonight we're discussing the Four Noble Truths. So we're kind of skipping ahead in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, and we're skipping up to chapter 18 as it's in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. But to put this into a context, the Four Noble Truths, the Four Noble Truths was the first teaching of the Wheel of Dharma by the Buddha Shakyamuni. So when we talk about the story of the Buddha, the life story of the Buddha, if you all remember that he attained enlightenment by sitting underneath the tree, the tree of enlightenment, the banyan tree. And he sat there, and during that time, his personal demons came up, and he was able to recognize them as being false. And he was able to subdue them by saying that he would not follow them, that they would have to follow him. And that they then more or less disappeared. And he was able, in that session, in that meditation session that he had, to be able to liberate himself from all attachments and all aversions, all the things that we hold on to, all the mental misconceptions that we have, and all the habitual tendencies became completely transparent to him. So then at that time, he was able to recognize the lives of all beings. He was able to see the many lives that human beings experience. And it's said in the stories of the Buddha and everything that he saw his lifetimes, his many lifetimes, as different sentient beings, as different human beings, as different animals, and places that were undescribable to us ordinary human beings. So he was able to recognize that, and he recognized all the future lives of beings and so on, and he realized the nature of mind, the nature of our human mind, the nature of our true mind. So two different things. The nature of the human mind is very limited, but the within us is our true nature, which we describe as our Buddha nature. But many different traditions experience the same true nature, but they might have different names for it. We call it Buddha, but other traditions might call it the Christ. They might call it God. They might call it Yahweh. They might call it Mohammed. They might have all different names for it. The Hindu have different names for it, and so on. So it's not exclusively a Buddha, a Buddhist idea, this true nature. So this is an important teaching of the Buddha. And he said that we all have this Buddha nature within ourselves. And it's a matter of being able to rest our ordinary mind, our human mind, to be able to rest our mind, to be able to recognize and experience our true nature. So this is the reason why we study, we look at these teachings that the Buddha gave to us, what the masters have expounded upon over the many generations, and we practice these, just to be able to vicariously read and study these teachings does not necessarily put us squarely on the path and become the embodiment of the path. We need to be able to practice these. We need to be able to make these our own, to recognize this within ourselves. Because this true nature is within ourselves. What is exterior to us is just this phenomenal nature, all this confusing stuff and so on that we recognize as appearances. We see these things as appearances, but we think that they're all real. We think that they're permanent, but it's all just temporary. It's all just a way in which we recognize things as being maybe permanent, but ultimately it is all temporary. That which is permanent is this true nature within ourselves that is indescribable. That is, as human beings, we can only approach this from an experience point of view. And for us to articulate it is impossible. We don't have the words to be able to express that. However, we can, when we have these glimpses of this true nature, we can transmit this. We can kind of radiate this within ourselves and to other beings and so on. So this is one of the profound teachings of the Buddha. One of that we all have this true nature. We all have this Buddha nature, what we call Buddha nature, and that we send it out through our heart center. So our heart center is the big mind, what we would call the big mind. The little mind is our intellect, is in our brain, and it's all temporary, and it's all just illusions, things that we have created for ourselves and so on, is what this intellectual mind has created for ourselves, where our ego is and so on. And all this is held within our physical body, which we all know is temporary and is very vulnerable to suffering in many different ways and so on. And our intellect is very susceptible to suffering as well, all the different kinds of confusions that we have, all the different kinds of neuroses that we develop and so on, are all sufferings of the intellectual mind. But the pure mind, the big mind, does not have suffering. It can get blocked up by our suffering of our little mind and our physical body. But the true mind, the big mind, is completely in a state of blissfulness, of happiness, if we want to call it that. And so by doing our studies and doing our practices, we begin to have glimpses of that true nature over and over and over again. So the Buddha Shakyamuni Buddha, who was a human being who lived 2,600 years ago, was able to recognize this. And he was able to put into words not what enlightenment is, but he was able to express how it is that he attained enlightenment for himself. And through this, we've been able to follow those instructions, to be able to follow those teachings. And many, many, many beings have been able to successfully attain that enlightenment and reach that enlightenment and so on. And it is there for us to be able to do. So it's through following the Dharma teachings. Those are the teachings of the Buddha. The Dharma is a pathway. And the Dharma teachings of the Buddha is the pathway to enlightenment. So that's what we are studying. That's what these books are all about. You know, the Jewel Ornament of Liberation is the main book that we refer to as stages of the path, how to progressively go through these stages to be able to get to the Buddhahood, what we call Buddhahood. And Buddha is a Sanskrit word that literally means awakened one. So we all have this potential within us to be awakened. And so it's a matter of removing all those blockages. So it's kind of like removing all the veils from our eyes. It's like removing the sleep from our eyes. And it's like waking up and then realizing all this around us, what it truly is, to be able to see it as an awakened Buddha field. So as I said, it's not exclusively for the Buddhist. All different traditions have their way of explaining this. But in Buddhism, it's very articulate. There is a lot of texts that we can follow that help us to recognize this. And there is a system of following practice, of how to practice, how to experience this the meditation that transcends our ordinary human consciousness, that we're able to transcend ourselves, be able to transcend our physical body, be able to transcend our intellectual body, and be able to open up our heart, to be able to recognize our heart center and see this true nature, to recognize this true nature that we are part of. So this spiritual journey, this spiritual that we do, the spiritual actually means connection. Is a Sanskrit word, or rather, spirit is not a Sanskrit word, but what it means is this connection that we all have with ourselves, with each other, with all beings, with all of what we call nature and so on, that we are all connected in that. So we have a physical connection, we have an intellectual connection, but we also have a spiritual connection. And that's what we are endeavoring to reveal to ourselves, to be able to recognize and become the embodiment of that realization. So the Buddha Shakyamuni then, after he attained enlightenment, then he paced around for 49 days, 7 weeks. And he was being beseeched, he was being supplicated by what were to be his first 5 disciples, his first 5 students, to tell them, to teach them how it is, what it is to become the Buddha, because they recognized that he had attained enlightenment. He himself may not have, he may have recognized it, but they could see it. They could see that he had changed because they knew him before he attained enlightenment. And once he attained this enlightenment, he then had this glow about him. And so these 5 soon-to-be disciples recognized this and were asking him to teach them. But for 49 days, he says, I don't know what to tell you. So it's so beyond what it is to be a human being. I don't have words for it. So for 49 days, he paced about, and then he made his way through parts of northern India at the time. And He was all the time, I'm sure, contemplating, thinking, and he devised the Dharma teachings. He devised a way to be able to teach not what it is to be enlightened so much as how it is to become enlightenment. So that's what the Dharma is. And then when they finally got to a place called Sarnath on the western suburb of Varanasi in India, then he sat down in a meadow underneath a tree, and these 5 disciples were following him this whole time. And he said, now sit in front of me, and I'm going to give you the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. So this first turning is the 4 noble truths. They're actually referred to in the Tibetan, they're referred to simply as the 4 truths. But, to be able to give it a little bit more meaning here in the West, they've, used the name the 4 noble truths to separate it from all other truths. But nevertheless, the 4 truths are the essence of what it is to be a human being and how it is to be able to liberate oneself from the bonds, the limitations of a human being, to liberate oneself, to be able to become the embodiment of the true nature that we have within ourselves. So these are the 4 noble truths. So first is that all life has suffering. All beings have suffering. We may have great happinesses, but those happinesses over time will shift and they will change and they become suffering. That there is, we can be happy in our relationships, but relationships change. We can have death in our family, death with our friends, and so on. We die, and so on. So we may have this precious human body and this precious life, and so on, but we know that that's going to come to an end. So all things that we think of, all things that we possess, all things that we want, and so on, all present suffering for us. So all life, whether we're rich or we're poor, we have suffering. Whether we're a man or a woman, we're suffering. Whether we're young or old, we have suffering. And again, it doesn't mean that 100% of our time is suffering, but everything that we do have and everything will become suffering. So being able to understand that and being able to accept that and being able to move in the direction of liberation from that suffering then becomes the next truth. What is the cause of this suffering? If we all have this suffering, what's the cause of this suffering? So the cause of this suffering are our attachments, the things that we want, the desires that we have, or it's the aversions that we have, the hatred that we have, or it's the ignorance that we have, that we don't even know what it is that we don't know, but we think that we know. That's part of the human condition, to think that we're wise enough that we can understand all things. But that just becomes a trap for us. We get caught up in our own arrogance of thinking that we know what is happening around us. And then we begin to insulate ourselves from new ideas and so on. But we also can suffer from jealousies, from envy. We can suffer from greed. We can suffer from pridefulness. These are the causes of our suffering. So basically, we say that suffering is caused by our desire to have this life, this desire to have this body. Now, you got to recall that Buddhism came out of Hinduism. Hinduism was part of the culture long before the Buddha came. So in the East and in India, it was well practiced, well thought of, well considered as part of their culture, that we have many lives, that we've been born many times, that we have died many times. The idea of reincarnation, that we will, that we go through this lifetime and that we accumulate certain things or we don't accumulate certain things. And then when we die, the seeds of those things that we have accomplished or not accomplished and so on, we take with us. And then these seeds then come to fruition and grow in a new lifetime, in a new body and so on. So this is really an oversimplification of the idea of reincarnation, but to make it understood that this was part of the Eastern philosophy of reincarnation. So the point here was that because we have this attachment to our bodies, and that this body will die, but then we will find another body and come back, and that these seeds from prior lifetimes will follow into these new lifetimes and so on. So we're always seeking a new body. We're always seeking a new life. And as we're doing that, you see, we are creating more and more attachment. And from the attachment comes the suffering. Another way of saying this is, if we liberate ourselves from being reborn, if we liberate ourselves to become the Buddha, the awakened one, then there's no suffering. But as long as we keep reincarnating as a human being, we keep reincarnating in this experience, that this experience is steeped in the suffering. So there's many reasons why we do that and so on. And part of the Dharma teachings are to be able to give meaning to that, to be able to help us to understand what that is. So it takes many, many, many passes of looking at what the teachings are to be able to understand and to be able to liberate ourselves from that, because this desire is so deep rooted within ourselves. So the question becomes then, how do we liberate ourselves? How do we stop this desire? How do we stop this suffering? So the third noble truth is that we have to renounce. We have to be a renunciate. We have to cease seeking a new life. We have to let ourselves go. We have to let this body go. We have to let being reborn again go and just remain as pure spirit, because we have a physical body, we have an intellectual body that is all tied together, these two bodies, but our spiritual body is something that is beyond our physical and our intellectual. But we have this within ourselves. It's like our true nature. It's that true nature. It's that our life force is another way of expressing it, that we have this life force. So to be able to liberate, to be able to renounce this life and so on, becomes the solution, becomes the answer to how to stop suffering. But that is very, very, very subtle. That is very vague. That is very abstract. How do we do that? In our minds, many different things might come up. Does it mean that we kill ourselves? Does it mean that we stop living? How do we do that? When we die, do we not go through reincarnation? How do we do that? So the idea here is that what we are doing as we are enacting in our lives and creating this suffering and these seeds and so on, that we are creating what we call karma. That this suffering are the results from karma. And karma is another Sanskrit word that means action. So an action precipitates a result. And for there to be an action, there has to be a cause. There has to be a thought. There has to be something that says, okay, now I'm going to do this, that, or the other thing. Or I'm even not going to do anything. That can create a karma too, because you can just withdraw and say, I'm not going to enact in any given situation and so on. So these causes come manifest in these conditions, when conditions are right in our phenomenal life, in this nature life that we have and so on. And when the conditions are right, the causes come up, these seeds like germinate, they like pop open, and like a seed that's you put in the ground that grows a tree or something like that, a stalk comes and then life begins to come and so on like that. So it's an analogy for understanding, this, how it is that we are born over and over again, and how it is that we have this suffering over and over again. So the point here is, in this third truth of the cessation of suffering, is the renunciation of having to be born again. I don't want to be born again. I want to liberate from this life. So that's a very strong statement to say that. So we look at this many times in many ways, over and over and over again. So in this one session, we're certainly not going to have all the answers for what all these questions might come about. But these four truths, these four noble truths, are the essence of what it is to be a human being and what it is to be liberated as a human being, to become a Buddha, to become an awakened one. So we may not understand it right away, is my point. So the third noble truth was that we have to just simply stop being reincarnated. How do we do that? That sounds very difficult to do. I mean, it's hard to grasp what this karma is. It's hard to grasp what this suffering is, and so on. So how do we stop doing this? Well, we stop it by causing ourselves to have negativity, causing ourselves to have non-virtue, that we lead happy lives, that we don't create negativity for ourselves, because the negativity is what we gravitate to be able to have attachments and so on. So the point is that we develop a way to be able to look at our lives and have a way to be able to evaluate where we are, what it is that we're doing, why it is that we're doing it, and so on, to purify ourselves from non-virtue, to purify ourselves from unwholesomeness, to purify ourselves from negativity, so that we can become pure good, pure goodness. And then this heart, this true nature, is the essence of that goodness. So we liberate ourselves in that which we already have, is this pure goodness, this pure virtue. So what is this evaluation? This evaluation is called the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is a way of looking at our lives. It has these 8 markers, these 8 ideas, these 8 ways of being able to recognize what it is that we are doing, who it is that we are in our lives and so on, so that we can make corrections. One thing that human beings can do that is very special, that is a great gift of being a human being, is that we can change. We can change our minds. We can change this mind. We can purify this mind that opens up our realization of this mind, of the big mind, of the heart mind. So through changing, through recognizing our situations, recognizing the conditions of those situations, what has precipitated those conditions and so on, can we facilitate the change? Can we make the changes? So how do we do this? What is this eightfold path of realizing who it is, what it is that we're doing? So the first of these is to have the right view. The right view means that we see who we are, what it is that we are, and the right view is that we have freedom, that we want freedom. All beings want to be free. All beings want to be happy. All beings want to be able to move in a way that is unencumbered, that has no limits, and so on. Well, what we do as human beings, as soon as we're born trapped in this body, this true nature that we have, this essence of who we are, this life force is trapped in this human body. And we have all the limitations of not knowing because we're completely ignorant when we're born. We don't know anything. And we have to go through, teachings that we receive from our parents, and then we go through teachings, from our friends, and then we go to school and we receive all these teachings and so on about what human beings think all this is. But it's always missing this point of our spirituality, or many people, I should say, are missing the point of this connectedness of the spirituality. So the right view is that we want liberation, that we want freedom, that we are free, but we also are the ones that are imprisoning ourselves. And we have to take responsibility for that. So the first thing, the first view, the right view is the view that you have responsibility for your own freedom. The second of the Eightfold Path is to have the right resolve to do this. Did you say, yes, I recognize, or I kind of understand that there's this freedom, and I understand that there's this I want to be free, and I really need to dedicate, I really need to commit my life in every way that I can to becoming free. So we need to follow a system, and that system then becomes a protection for us. As we take in the system and we begin to utilize that system, that structure, that system becomes like an umbrella, like a parasol that is protecting us from the harsh sunlight, or from rain, or from the weather, or whatever. That this protection is our resolve to be good, our resolve to be virtuous, our resolve to follow the teachings, to be able to purify ourselves. So that's the second of the Eightfold Path. The third of the Eightfold Path is to always speak the truth. Part of our problem, human beings' problem, is that they create all this negativity about themselves because they don't understand what's going on, but they tell lies all the time. They're creating these false stories, and we begin to believe these false stories, and we create this web of what we think is true, and then we get caught up in the web, and we can't break free from that web. And that web is made up of all these compounded stories that we've made for ourselves, that are based on ignorance, that are based on delusion, that are based on desire, that are based on greediness and pridefulness. We're trying to rationalize our human existence in this world. So we create all these stories to say, oh, this is who I am, this is why I am, and so on, like that. But if we always speak the truth, we don't have to keep up with all those lies that we tell. We don't have to maintain this story, that we can allow ourselves to change naturally. That we don't have an ego to satisfy, And the ego, it's the maker of all these stories and so on, all these lies that we tell. So through always saying the truth, especially when we don't know what the truth is, the hardest thing for human beings to say, at least for most of us, is to say, I don't know. And because I don't know, I'm not going to do anything that is going to create a negativity. I'm just going to kind of stand back and not feel that I have to do something. But we create our negativity, we manifest that negativity through doing something, through saying, oh, well, let me try this. Let me believe this. Let me say this. And then we create all this web of confusion for ourselves. But if we always tell the truth, even when it comes to the point where we don't know, we say, I just don't know. And let me see if I can find out what it is that I don't know. And maybe we have to go through different systems to be able to do that. We live, in a land where there's many different paths that we can follow and so on, many different traditions that we can follow. And we can examine all of those. And it's all fine to do that. But that's what we should do, is be able to examine what our choices are, to be able to see but to be humble about it, and to be able to not have to say, I know something when I really don't know. So that's the third noble truth, to always speak the truth. Then the fourth noble truth is to have the right, to have the right conduct, that we are always involved in doing good deeds for other people, for ourselves, for our family, for our friends, for strangers, people that we don't know that can live on the other side of the globe, the other side of the earth, that we're always doing good deeds, that we have good behavior, good conduct. And we're capable of devising a morality for ourselves and recognizing what it is that causes suffering and pain to ourselves and to other people, and to abide within that morality, and to be able to accept the responsibility for being able to do that. And that we maintain that through our connections, through our, as I said, our relatives and our friends and so on like that, through the things that we do, the way in which we respect the phenomenal nature, the way we respect nature, the way we respect the earth and everything, that it is a living body itself, and that we have to maintain its health and so on, just like we have to maintain our health. So the fourth noble truth is to have the right action, the right conduct, the right behavior that is steeped in morality, that does not hurt other beings, hurt ourselves. Then the fifth is to have the right livelihood. The right livelihood means that we live in society. Human beings don't live very well by themselves. It's almost impossible to live by yourself, especially when you're young. You're born completely helpless. You have to accept the help that is given to you and so on. And so as we give that help, as we have young children and so on, that we have, and that we, as we get older and we take responsibility, we take jobs, we go to school to learn those jobs and so on like that, that we find the right livelihood that is, that feels very natural to us, that it's our jobs. It's the way in which we work within our families and so on, the roles that we have within our families and our friends, the right livelihood. Now, we may go through many changes. What we think we want to do when we're 8 years old is certainly going to change by the time we get to be 18 years old. And by the time we're 18, we might have already started working and having relationships with people and so on. And we find things that work and we find things that don't work for ourselves. And so we have to be strong enough to be able to say, you know what? I made a few mistakes. I didn't do this quite right. I got to change. So that when we're 28 years old, now maybe we've tried a couple different relationships, we've tried a couple different jobs, we've lived in a couple different places, and so on like that, and but we were trying to find what comes natural to us, what is comfortable, where you can work in the environment and you can help other people in the process. And also what they are doing is helping you because you can't do everything. So it's like a barter system. If I do this for you, I'll accept what you can do for me that's going to help me. And so on. So maybe it's some people like to be farmers, some people like to be lumberjacks, some people like to be mechanics, some people like to be doctors, some people like to be lawyers, all these different things that we can try, that we can do in our lifetime and so on, and finding out what the right combination of those things are. When we get to be 30 years old, by now, we've gone through a number of changes, and now we should be settling into what our work is. And we can have hobbies and different things that we do that help people and satisfy people and so on like that, satisfy ourselves. But we find that we have this right livelihood, this engagement with society. So that's the fifth of the Eightfold Path. The sixth is to have the right effort, that we're always moving forward, that we can feel ourselves going forward, that we're making changes that are growing us, that we feel very natural in, that we feel happy in. And we can feel when we get stagnated. We can feel when we're going backwards. We can recognize that. We can see the suffering. We can see the confusion coming up. We can see those things that are causing that suffering now is manifesting. And so we can take responsibility for that and say, okay, I'm not making the right choices. I'm not moving forward. Maybe I'm making lateral moves. I'm just trading one set of circumstances for another set of circumstances, but I'm really not helping myself or others and so on. So my fulfilled. So I need to move forward. I need to have the right effort. So that is the sixth of the Eightfold Path. The seventh of the Eightfold Path is having the right mindfulness. Now, the right mindfulness means a couple different things. It means that you are consciously aware of what's going on around you from an ordinary, everyday perspective. That your job is working, your relationships are working, you're happy, you've got what you need, you got your nice home and all these things. All that is working. You can see that, and you can see that you can make changes if it's not working and so on, to recognize the everyday mundane kind of things that happen to us. But there's also a mindfulness of our spirituality, to be able to be developing our right mindfulness of our spirituality, because we are a human being that we can say has three bodies. And this is a very important point, that we have three bodies. We have our physical body and we have our intellectual body. And most people on the planet, that's all they really recognize. That's all they really know, is their physical body and their intellectual body. And it doesn't matter where they live. It doesn't matter what conditions they have, whether they're rich or poor. There are people who are very poor who may have a good intelligence and so on. But there are people that live in very abundant lands like where we live now in America, we have everything at our disposal, but still there's still a lot of people who all they know is their physical body and their intellectual body. So the third body is our spiritual body. And the spiritual body works with the physical body and the intellectual body. Now, whether we recognize it or not, our spiritual body is there. Somebody's got their microphone on. Could you turn it off, please? Thank you. So whether we recognize it or not, we all are spiritual beings. We may not understand that, we may not recognize it, but yet it's there. When we recognize it and we cultivate our recognition of that, and we allow that to work with our physical body and our intellectual body as an equal partner, if you will. It's kind of like having a stool. A stool. If you've got a stool that only has your physical body leg and it only has your intellectual body leg, it's a two-legged stool, and it's not going to support itself. It's going to fall very easily. But if you've got three legs, if your third leg is your spiritual body, now that supports the other two legs. Many of our illnesses, our physical illnesses and our intellectual illnesses come from not realizing and being able to activate and use our spiritual body. Our spiritual body will help guide our physical body and our intellectual body. If we don't have a good spiritual body, then the physical body may suffer, the intellectual body may suffer. If we have a good spiritual sense, we have a good recognition of that, but we're sick, we're not feeling well, if we're not feeling physically well, it's hard to be able to concentrate. It's hard to be able to think with our brain. It's also hard to be able to meditate. If our intellect is not right, if we're not feeling good about ourselves, if we don't have a sense of good well-being, then that can affect our meditation as well. Our spirituality can affect our physical health as well. We can have psychosomatic illness. So that's a very brief way of being able to explain this relationship between our three bodies. And when we look at it, we can recognize that to be a complete human being is to have these three bodies working together with each other. If we're just a physical, intellectual being, we have no heart, we have no soul, we have no connection with other beings. But if we have all three going, now we become a complete human being. So that's a very important part of this seventh of the Eightfold Path, which is having the right mindfulness of recognizing our spirituality along with our physicality and our intellectualism. So now the eighth of the Eightfold Path is to have the right concentration, the right absorption. So what this means is that with all within us, you see, all these other 7 things now are all coming together within our embodiment, that we become the right concentration of this. And this concentration becomes wisdom, to have the right wisdom, the right awareness of wisdom. Wisdom has many different meanings to it. There can be ordinary wisdom about how to get in your car and drive your car down the road, and how to go do your job, and how to take care of your family and so on. But it also can be a higher wisdom about how it is that we can spend time being able to develop the awareness of our true nature and recognizing that. And that's what, our different philosophy, our different religions and so on, that's what they speak to, our spirituality. And there's wisdom there too. So being able to bring all this together, to bring this together within ourselves and so on, brings this right concentration. So it's kind of like you think of yourself as a beautiful vase, a vase, like you put flowers in a vase or something like that. And that we're the holder of all these things. All this is within ourselves and so on, within our lifetime is like this vase. And things are changing, things are evolving, and we can decorate that vase and so on, and we can embellish it, and we can put beautiful things in there and so on. But we have to take care of it. When things begin to wilt, it's best to take those things out and let those things, decompose naturally and so on, and not be feeling attached to them or leaving them in there, because they will then contaminate the other things that are in there. And then when things are empty, when the vase is empty, there's nothing to put in there, that we enjoy the space that is in that vase. Part of what we are trying to recognize is that there is this space that all this is taking place in. And this space is perfectly natural. But human beings have a predilection to be able to want to fill that space with their own inventions, with their own ego, with their own arrogance develops and so on like that. So to be able to recognize that, to be able to anticipate that, to be able to maintain a degree of humility through all this, although we may be wise, to be able to now have this humility about ourselves, and not to take advantage of other beings and so on. So this is the right concentration of being a human being, of all these things coming together. So these things, this eightfold path, you say, if we practice this properly, what we are doing is we are becoming happy. We are becoming virtuous. We are maintaining happiness. We are maintaining virtue. And we are not being pulled back into being an ordinary human being, but we are allowing ourselves to transcend, to lift up from being an ordinary human being into becoming a complete human being, a being that is a spiritual being, as well as a physical being and an intellectual being and so on. And through that, we are liberating ourselves through this purification of what all those negativities are that Eightfold Path is working on to purify. It's the objects of the Eightfold Path are these different things that we do in our lives, and we're purifying them, we're simplifying them. So altogether, this is the Four Noble Truths, that all life has suffering, all human beings have suffering in their lives, that the cause of the suffering is something that they make for themselves through their desire. And that, excuse me, I need a drink. So the cause of the suffering is their desire. And that what we need to do is to liberate from that cause of suffering. We have to liberate is the renunciation of this life, of this making suffering for ourselves. And we do that through the Eightfold Path, becomes the cause for the result of renunciation, of liberation. So that's the Four Noble Truths. That was the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma. That was the first teaching that the Buddha gave. And it's said that he gave 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma. And this was the first, and this is the most fundamental, the most important, and so on. And we come back to this over and over and over and over and over again. So does anybody have any questions or comments about this right now? So please turn your microphones on. Don't hesitate to speak up. Okay. So you all are just stupefied by this awareness now that there that there are these four truths. I know most of you have heard this all at least once, maybe two or three or four times or something like that. How has this realization, how has this teaching helped you in your life? Or maybe it hasn't helped you. Maybe it's still elusive to you.
Well, I carry the Eightfold Path in my phone.
Well, don't lose your phone.
No, I look at it often enough that I know it, but I try to make a point of looking at it and the Four Noble Truths early in the day when I start my day, to try to set it in my mind. That doesn't mean I have a perfect day, but that's what I try to do. It's something that's always with me and something I can always look at. When the day gets complicated, or when I feel myself, feeling swept up in things, I can look at that, and it's a tool. There are others. And sooner or later I will have them memorized. I largely do now, but.
So you've seen this working, and it's been very helpful to you.
It works. The only way it would work for me, and that I kind of think that this is true as most of us, is that we have to set ourselves every day by reminding ourselves of what our direction is and what our guidance is, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, because we're going to have many distractions and temptations hurled at us every day, especially in this age. And that's true for me. I don't think that I'm that different from a lot of people. So I think that it's something that you have to look at constantly every day. You have to set your focus every day. And remember that there are going to be tripwires that you hit out there.
Mm-hmm.
And you react to them.
What was the most difficult part for you?
Concentration. The world is a storm, and my mind is a lot, I find. And what I try to do is expose more or less the things that will provoke that storm that I can do nothing about. Doesn't mean that I'm indifferent or that anyone else is indifferent to the things that provoke me, whether I think it's injustice or anything like that. But I try to understand what my limits are, and I try to meditate. I was meditating today, and boy, was it difficult, because the world was too much with me. And, I kept remembering one of the things that Kempo said in Flight of the Garuda at various points was, don't chase your thoughts. Don't chase your thoughts. And I was remembering that, and in remembering that, I realized how much of that I really do. And that may be the case with a lot of other people too. You have a thought and you chase it. And you don't end up any better off, and often worse off, emotionally and spiritually and otherwise.
Very good. Thank you. So this is the application of the system of the Dharma teachings, being able to help us and to recognize what it is that is causing us to chase thoughts, and how it is that we can stop chasing those thoughts.
Yeah, it's use a term that we've used: habitual tendencies. Habitual tendencies.
Right.
I have tons of those, and they're well intended. for the most part. Not that I don't have some awful destructive thoughts sometimes, but for the most part, they're well intended. But I'm going down a path that is really a dead end road with most of my solutions. So I try to establish a set point, is what I've done with these things, and go from there.
Well, thank you very much for your comments. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share with us? Any thoughts about this?
I do.
Yes, Michael.
Yeah, I've been living with these four truths for 30 plus years, and on and off I struggled with the idea of truth. It's almost like there aren't a lot of truths in our world, but this is sort of an interesting example of a relative truth. So it's absolutely true on the relative level, on our level. But at the same time, it's the truths themselves are, depending on your position on that holographic spiral, are relevant to that position, and have the potential to change in their meaning and their impact and their power to inspire, while at the same time remaining quite true. So it's almost a paradox. Today I don't believe much of what I see as true. I believe the majority of what I'm seeing is most definitely made up by my mind. But to have a truth that the historical Buddha called true, and to believe that those truths are about as permanent as we get with regard to statements, and still have those truths be fluid, be accommodating to different levels of illumination and different situations. I think it's an amazing bundle of assertions, and I continue to gain through contemplation, and naturally they're completely tied together, and there's no real need to go from 1 to 4. Going from 4 to 1 is fine, or thinking about 3 and then skipping to 2. They're so interwoven. It's really a fascinating little cluster of assertions, and as true as it gets, as permanent as it gets, and completely relative.
Thank you. Someone else want to make a comment, please? Ed, you turned your microphone on.
Michael says that most of what he, I don't know what the word, encounters, sees, perceives, it is not true, or he doesn't think it's true. Most of it's not true. How do you decide, Michael, what part is and what part isn't? How do you determine?
I don't determine. I assume that this that what I'm seeing is only what I get to see from my most limited sense array, and that there's 99% of what's possible to perceive I don't get to see. So I'm looking at a speck of reality. So for me, it's best just to doubt it all. just
Okay.
to doubt everything,
Yet-
everything that I think I see, though.
Yet you're allowing that some of it, some piece of it, some speck of it is true, whatever we mean by true. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, how do you think, how would you think that our dualistic point of view of things as human beings, that we are caught in our dualism, how does that notion illuminate that idea?
I think the moment we consider something, anything, as an object, we are setting up a duality and a concept, and any concept is begins as an illusion. There's in truth there are no dualities. That's our human little mind wanting to put things in boxes. And
So in other words, so if I can just, so our true nature then is to be free of dualism.
absolutely.
What do you think of that, Ed?
I think I think it's better for me to be silent and appear a fool than to open my mouth and remove all doubt. I don't know.
Okay.
I think it's time for Ed and I to have some Starbucks coffee together.
Yeah, we're overdue for that. Yeah.
Well, that's what this is all about, is recognizing that all this suffering, all this dualism, is perfectly natural in the phenomenal world, but at the same time, where there's no time, that all this is kind of like, for lack of a better word, is kind of suspended in this space of potentiality. And that's where the liberation is. That's where the non-conceptual, freedom is. So the question then becomes, to what degree do we want to become enslaved? Do we want to be free? Do we really want to be free? Or are we satisfied with being a little bit enslaved in this situation or that situation?
Enslavement is security.
Okay. Being imprisoned, in other words.
It's just, yeah.
Ed, do you want to say a little more about that?
I didn't. I didn't hear what you said.
Do you want to say a little more
Oh.
about that? That was really interesting.
Well, I think when we're completely free, we don't have reference points. We don't have boundaries. We don't. And I think there's some security in knowing I can go this far. I could the time in my life, I think I was the most emotionally stable was probably when I was in the military, because there were decisions that I wasn't going to be able to make for a while. I mean, I was in a box where somebody else. I didn't like it, but I didn't have to decide. When I'm free, that's when monkey mind, or I don't freedom is hard to handle.
It is.
I don't know, I'm stumbling around, but enslavement provides boundaries, and boundaries provide security, whether we like it or not. So I don't want to be enslaved as a total way of life, but maybe there's some little ways that I do.
Okay. Anybody else got a thought about this? Rebecca, what do you think about this?
See, I went down a rabbit hole in my head and I can't remember where we started.
Well, what was the rabbit hole? You know, we were talking about freedom. You know, we were talking about that you know, we have all these dualisms that we live in, and that the dualisms are natural to our phenomenal nature, but the phenomenal nature is actually just something that we've kind of created for ourselves, and that we allowed ourselves to be born again, so to speak, if we can use that, you know, but we'd all like to be free. You know, can anyone say, yeah, I really want to be imprisoned. I really want to be, you know, I'll be this much in prison and be happy. Or do I really want to just be free?
Well, you guys know that I have been dealing with some stuff with my family.
Mm-hmm.
And my relationship with my stepmother, who is my only still living parent, is torturous at best.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been amazingly bad over Thanksgiving, to the point that I simply came to the conclusion that she delights in hating me for reasons that I may never understand. And my question has always been, how much of this am I supposed to live with before I'm allowed to say, I don't want to have her in my life? And I had an epiphany last week when I hit the word allowed. Because allowed by whom? And when I really pick it apart, the answer is her. And there is a tremendous amount of freedom on the other side of that realization, that the only person who's really allowing me anything is this squirrel that's running around in my head thinking that there are a whole lot of rules and constructs that I have to live according to.
Yeah, yeah.
Your thoughts, Rebecca? It's your thoughts, right? I mean, it is with all of us. I believe that's what you're saying.
It's just whatever it is that has absorbed that, you know, what Lance calls phenomenal nature, right? The world that we live in and all the rules and the constructs and everything that we've sort of been taught is real, that when you look at them really hard, they really aren't. So, I don't know that I want to be a little bit enslaved. I'm kind of enjoying being able to look at it and say, you know what, you're just horrible.
Yeah.
You can be horrible over there.
Yeah. Okay. I don't.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ed.
No, so I'm not first in line. William had his hand up.
Oh, okay. William?
Well, I was going to say that freedom is within your thoughts, because if a person is in jail, that's a very restricted spot, but they can have the freedom that somebody out here walking around doesn't have, because they have the openness, open-mindedness that doesn't restrict them.
What do you mean? You mean in their own mind?
Well, the thing that binds us is our ignorance. And
Ignorance of what?
well, ignorance. It's the
Of that which we don't know?
no, it's not an ignorance of what we don't know. It's our ignorance of what we do know. And what and how we have used what we know to manipulate ourselves into a box.
So we might call that our delusions, you know, our life of delusions, you know, and
Well, you can, you know, a lot of this stuff that you're talking about is purely semantics, where a lot of the people that come here have a quote unquote Christian background, and some of the words and some of the things that they use, or you use different words for them, and the semantics gets there, and then it's for a while it gets you confused, and you don't know where you're at, because you haven't quite got all of the labels repasted.
So how does the Eightfold Path help us to recognize all the dynamics that you just spoke about? The semantics and the language and the appearances and our labeling that and everything. How does the Eightfold Path work as a tool to be able to help us to figure that out? Or does it, or doesn't it?
Well, I think the Eightfold Path is create structure and gives you a methodology to follow to get to an end product that is hard to describe.
A number of us, you know, in the past year, 2 years, have heard this, you know, a couple, 3 times or whatever, you know. How many people actually really think about this and use the Eightfold Path? I mean, Gary was saying that he uses it on a daily basis. So I'm just, maybe you don't even have to put your hand up, but I'm Gary, do you think you're better off for using the Eightfold Path as a guide than not use it than before? Did you feel you were more in a quandary, bewildered by what's going on, and less so now because of the Eightfold Path?
I absolutely was in a quandary, and I'm only steps along the Eightfold Path, but I'm better off. I believe the most important thing, or the most impactful thing to me that I've learned about, is the impact on me, and I believe on all of us, of thoughts. I continually find that theme in all my teaching, what Kempo teaches and what I read everywhere, And part of the most important part of the Eightfold Path we just talked about is mindfulness. And that is what has been particularly important for me. And I have kept accessible to me something I read as often as I can by Milarepa, and that I think affects our relationships with the world and our reaction to what happens in the world, and in the case of what's been discussed recently, particular people, and we all have particular people. And Milarepa said, when you run after your thoughts, you're like a dog chasing a stick. Every time a stick is thrown, you run after it. Instead, be like a lion who, rather than chasing after the stick, turns to face the thrower. One only throws a stick at a lion once. And
Good.
This is, of course, metaphorical. You're not talking about throwing a stick at somebody, but you're talking about the situation, the energy that is capturing you, that you're trying to get rid of.
All right. Well, let me bring it back then to Rebecca now, who seems to have had an epiphany. You know, you just said that you have some kind of, so could you relate that to an Eightfold Path experience, you think?
I don't know if I could do it directly. I could probably back my way into it. But the general concept of attachment was, I think, crucial for me to get to where I got to. Right? To recognize that I was being stopped by an attachment to an idea that doesn't exist in the natural world. It just exists as an idea. Does that make sense?
Yes. So, you know, of course, I'm trying to use it to support, you know, the Eightfold Path here, but do you think that, you know, some of these teachings have helped you to recognize that?
Well, I would say that the Four Noble Truths, definitely. Right. I mean, I see the correlation between spending time with that concept and what I was able to see. Right. They're directly tied. I don't know about the Eightfold Path specifically, but definitely the Four Noble Truths.
So there was a system in place, you know, as sketchy maybe as it might have been, there was still, you know, a method that was being applied here. There was an application being applied.
Having those ideas in my head, right? Having obtained them as a way to look at the problem, as opposed to looking at it from the perspective that I had when I was a Christian or as a Jew. It gave me a different vantage point that let me see something that I would not have been able to see otherwise.
Okay. Zara, how about you? You've been quiet on this topic so far, but I know you're thinking about it. What do you think about this?
Just in general, everything that's been said, or just anybody's comments, or?
Well, I mean, how does this apply to you? You know, have you been able to use the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, in a way that has been helpful, that to break through, you know, a degree of bewilderment, you know, confusion or whatever?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, last night I had a eureka moment where I sort of had a very aversive experience with a family member who was very unkind to me. Very hurtful words. Like, if you just listen to the words, like, very hurtful, and a year ago, I would have been in tears and crying. It would have been a very emotional event for me. And I was able to just step outside of it and recognize what was happening in a way I don't even think I could have done 6 months ago. And I was actively pulling into the lessons we're learning here together in that moment acutely, and use those skills to have active compassion in a moment of, I would say, someone having a massive panic attack with me and meltdown and attacking me. And I would not have been able to do that a year ago. I would have started screaming and gone into the cycle with them. but I was able to give space and allow it just to go through. And I did not attach to the words. As Gary said, the thoughts that came up about why is this person saying so many bad things, they just went right through me. And I didn't hold on to them. I let them come and then go. And then I was able to practice compassion to this person, and imagine they were suffering. And I was trying to figure out a way to ease that. So I would not have been able to do that a year ago.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yep. Shannon, I don't want to, I want to, respect the fact that I think you're still in a car and listening and everything, but do you have any comments about this? How does this land on you? Hearing maybe this kind of stuff for the first time, or what do you think about this?
I'm actually hearing everything for the first time, but prior to me meeting you guys and going into the Zoom meeting, I was talking to a guy that he is Buddhist, and he first started me off with like telling me to chant and just, just find time to meditate, just, center myself. And I'm learning that it helps, but it takes work every day, because you deal with all the trials and tribulations through life with whether friends, family members, kids, you constantly dealing with something. So you had to constantly work every day with something, and try to at least put some type of positivity out there. That way you can receive it back. And then, I'm learning, slowly but surely learning. So.
Okay, thank you. Tom, we haven't heard from you this evening.
Oh, I'm just taking in everything, everything that's being said so far, the four thoughts that turn the mind, you've gone not extensive, but you've talked quite a bit about karma. Everything that happens to us is some form of karma. So when we feel disrespected, when we feel tortured, when we feel complimented by somebody, all that's karma. And it's taken me a long time to really realize that someone, can say something really mean and vicious, or do something really mean and vicious, And how we accept that, that's what being a Buddhist is being able to accept that. And it's easy to say there's good karma and bad karma. To me, karma is like a mirror. When you do something in front of a mirror, it just mimics back exactly what you're doing. It doesn't say that's good or bad. It's just, it mimics back exactly what you're doing. So, when I watch the news or something, I see these shootings, and I see the parents are suffering because their children. And, it's really cold and callous to say, oh, it's just karma, But being a Buddhist, you have compassion for everyone that's suffering, And you can suffer in the slightest way or in the deepest way by losing somebody, or, a parent, losing a child. That's no parent wants to go through that, But it's all karma. So, when I have good days and bad days, just realize it's my own doing, and learn to accept that. Because like Michael said, this is temporary. I mean, this is all an illusion. But sometimes it doesn't seem so. It really doesn't. It seems very real, you know, the emotions and the feelings we have. But you know, and that's why we go through these teachings over and over and over and over. Yeah. Because we're hoping that the cause and the conditions will come to where we can accept these things, you know. So it's not an easy thing, but you know, we all have the ability, because we are, like, you know, Lance said, we have that perfect nature. We all have that Tathagata Garbha, the Buddha nature. And you know, to tap into that, to have some clarity, that's, you know, that's the most important thing. So you know, it's wonderful to, you know, to hear everyone's thoughts and opinions, and you know, just I understand sometimes it's hard, but it's, you know, just remember it's karma.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I just have trouble getting my mind around karma. Maybe it's because I'm using the small mind rather than the big mind. I don't know, but could you tell me what, how do you, I don't, I'm not trying to turn you into a dictionary, but how do you define karma? What is karma?
Well, like I said, it's you know, like a mirror.
It's like, it's what goes around comes around.
No, not just what comes. I mean, it's how you accept it. You know, like I said, some people say there's good karma, bad karma, you know, but it's karma. So the moment that you wake up, that you open your eyes, or even before that, what you're thinking, what you're saying, what you're doing, all that combines and comes to a head. And you're responsible for all those things, with your thoughts, your speech, and your actions.
Yeah, that's
Sometimes really hard to swallow.
yeah.
Thomas, would you like to comment on anything we've been talking about?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I've heard that the word dukkha, which is most often translated as suffering, is derived from the word sukha. And sukha has the meaning of contentment. And dukkha is its opposite, or discontent. So rather than suffering, discontent. And I've mulled that over, and as I just in the past few minutes reviewed my life, the only suffering that comes to my mind in my life is I had childhood asthma. It's very difficult to breathe. So you don't know whether you're going to live or not. That was suffering. But the rest of my life, more like encountering discontent than suffering. So just relating my own personal experience. And the other is about right livelihood. And I've never heard it as like finding your groove. I've heard it more as being engaged in activity that does not bring harm to other people. or to other living creatures. So I won't say what that activity would be, but obviously there are activities that humans engage in that do cause harm. So that would not be right livelihood. And I think that the first hour or so when you were talking, I think that you did a very good job of covering the Four Truths and the Eightfold Path. I think you laid it out very well. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Lavani, did you have anything you wanted to add to the conversation? I guess.
There you go. Okay. She slipped off to the little girls' room. So
I see. Okay.
I don't think there's very much conversation there.
Okay. All right.
You know, all of this karma is a very simple thing that's cause and effect. If you do something, you're responsible for whatever comes of this event. And the thing that most people don't realize about the karma is that it can be from 1,000 years ago when you did something incorrectly, or when you did something correctly. Could be that you're having a very, very good time and you feel very skillful because 1,000 years ago, by golly, you learned how to do this act and now you got it down pat. So karma is not about good or bad. Karma is about being responsible for, like Thomas said, your thoughts, your words, and your actions.
Okay.
I had a quick question about livelihood. So say I was a butcher and I slaughtered hogs, or I was a fisherman. I fished, sell those fish to feed my family, to take care of my kids, take care of my wife. My intention is not to kill those, fish, but the ways to make a living. So what's more important, the action of killing or capturing those fish, selling them, or the intention of taking care of my family?
One of the stories that one of the masters that I follow used to talk about was when you said butcher, I thought, oh, well, this is a good one. It was about a fellow that was a butcher, and his whole concept or ideal was service. And he happened to turn out to be a saint, and that was one of the things that they were talking about, of your desire, your the reason behind what you're doing, whether it's a selfless service to somebody, or whether it's selfish thing to get back. And that selfless desire alleviates a lot of the situations, because there's nothing. I'm a vegetarian. Okay. There's nothing that you do in your day-to-day life that doesn't involve some kind of an ending of a life. And I can't say whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, but you know, you have to take everything you do into account, and how compassionate you are, and how you that you deal with it. So doing karma or any event like that, you have to get in the person's mind and find out what they actually think about. Because a lot of times something that may appear to be incorrect is correct, and a lot of times we take on karma that we don't need to take on, but we take it on because we don't realize that karma is colorless, but we want to put a color on it to bring it out. And if it's something that we're doing or that we're not doing, it can be very it can be very involved, really. And you have to remember how many years has this planet been, and how many evolutions have we gone through to get to the point where we're at now. I mean, this just isn't something that happened in the last 50 or 75 or 100 years. This has been going on for thousands and thousands, 40,000 years.
All right.
So there you are. There's a number for you.
All right. Well, thank you for your thoughts on that. And that's a conversation that, we could spend days talking about, and it's a fair conversation to have. And the question about karma, the question about eating, what's right to be eating and so on like that. So we could talk about that another time, I think. Unless somebody has something else that you want to add to the conversation right now, we'll draw this to a close and recite our dedication prayers. I would like to say, though, before we sign off, that tonight is the 7th session of our 8-week cycle. So next week will be the 8th night of that. So we'll continue on with that. And I think we're going to talk about the 3 vehicles. So we'll be examining that. But then there's 2 Monday nights the rest of the month in December. So we could continue with conversations, and it's been suggested that we have some lively conversation about things like karma and eating and so on like that, and points of philosophy and so on. Ed has suggested a couple of things. If you want to continue and devote those 2 remaining Monday evenings of this month to that, is fine with me. I think that would be great. I would enjoy that. And so if you want to think about that and maybe bring up some topics so we all have a chance to be able to prepare for that, I think would be a good idea. So I'm not going to hold anybody to any thought about it more than this right now, but next week we can bring this up again and say if we want to do that. Next month, January, to start our next cycle, I've invited a geshe who lives in India, who is the brother of Dorje Damdol, who did the narrative for the Milarepa film. And he is a geshe that lives in India, like I said, and he has asked if we would like to, have him be part of our Zoom. So I've asked him to give his teaching on the life of the Buddha. So he doesn't speak English. So Dorje is going to have to translate. So it's going to take a couple of sessions, maybe even 3 sessions to get through the whole life and everything. But I thought that would be something to begin in January and do that before we even begin the next cycle of our Buddhism 101. So if anybody has any thoughts about that, I'd like to hear that. But that's some plan of how we're going to finish out this month and next month. So for now, let's do our dedication. So we go to our dedication prayers, and just to let Shannon know that there's 3 parts of every one of our practices and studies and meditations that we do. The first part is to set the motivation, the intention, which were the opening prayers that we recited. Then we do the main body, which has been this teaching and discussion that we have. And then at the end, then we take whatever merit that we have brought to bear, that we have gained through our discussion, through our practice. We take that merit and we are dedicating that for the enlightenment of other beings, so that we're not holding on to it ourselves. We are giving it to other beings. So this is the dedication part. And so all of our practices and teachings all have these 3 elements in there. So we turn to page 20, 21, and 22, and we recite this together, please. So turn your microphones off so we don't have the feedback problem, but please recite along with us. By the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Trikampa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation, until the end of samsara. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis, dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana and the innate word of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Sravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mothers sentient beings, boundless as the sky, may all mothers sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Mars and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all beings. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Sangha.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Thank you, everyone.
thank
All right.
you.
Thanks, everybody. Shannon, thank you for joining us. I hope you join us again next week and continue on. If you have any questions or comments you want to talk, we can have a conversation on the phone or something.
Okay.
Good night, friends.